Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the government's aim as far as new reforms are concerned to encourage foreign investment, particularly as with regard to ease of doing business. There's also Special Investment Facilitation Council. There's also land information and management systems among the new initiatives which have been introduced with an aim to facilitate new business, new investment, and also with the aim to, as it were, feed the economy as far as with investment from within and outside the country. We'll be talking about these initiatives themselves and their effect overall on the economy, what the government envisages and what they expect from these changes overall. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Ali Salman, who's Executive Director, Prime Institute. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, who's a former advisor, Ministry of Finance. Thank you for joining us. And Dr. Qais Aslam, who's a senior economist. Thank you for being with us today. Ji, Ali Salman sahab, like we were earlier talking about these new initiatives, these new reforms, whatever one may say as far as the government is concerned, with an aim to bring about the kind of changes, quick fixes. Would you say these are quick fixes?
Well, I think this the major aim of setting up the Special Investment Facilitation Council goes, as per the announcement, goes beyond the quick fixes. And here they are talking about not only reducing the cost of doing business, but also streamlining the business regulations, improving the facilitation or coordination between federal and provincial government, and also setting up industrial zones. So this is a long-term plan. And one key feature of this plan is that, according to the government announcement, that they will improve the coordination between the civilian and military leadership of the state, right? So, and the assumption on the underlying plan is that, especially when we talk about external investors, they look for stability in the government, and unfortunately, the political governments in the last few years have not been able to provide that stability in policy outlook. So we can agree or disagree, but the objective is to ensure the stability and also to start systematic or institutional reforms. A lot of these have been there in the past also. I think a high level of coordination between military and civil leadership was not there, at least at this scale. We observed some of it, for instance, in CPEC authority in the past, which was then closed down. We also observed during FATF, when Pakistan was fighting its case, there was a significant coordination between the two sides of the state. I think this is another stage where a lot of details to be still unveiled. So it is too early to say unless we hear about those terms and conditions under which these investments are being planned.
Let me go to Dr. Khaqan Najeeb. Dr. Khaqan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Dr. Khaqan, overall, as far as what Ali Salman Sahab here is saying, he's saying that this is supposed to, this is an aim to ensure a stable environment. When we talk about stability, when we talk about these measures being taken with an aim to bring about that kind of stability that the investors want, what about the timing of it as far as the government is concerned?
So if you look at where Pakistan stands today, I've always said there are 4 ways that we can get out of where we are today, and we are at an uncomfortable position. No one can probably disagree. The first stability would come once we've signed with the IMF, which we did, and hopefully we'll have a board. The second stability would come once we are able to not only do this program, but we also start doing some structural work on the economy. The third thing is that these are debt instruments that we are working with Saudi Arabia, IMF, World Bank, but also by getting investment into the country. If you look at the FDI into Pakistan for the past several years, it's hovered around $1.5 to $2 billion. Certainly, I think Pakistan's potential is more. There was a time, about 15, 20 years ago when Pakistan was getting somewhere $7 to $8 billion of FDI coming in. I think it was 2006 or 7. So again, if we follow through these steps, the steps have now become very clear. And then another IMF program. So if we can put all these things together into a package, which I think now everyone is kind of agreed that we should do, then we can move on. As Salman's rightly saying, so FATF was one thing. The coordination on COVID was similar between the armed forces and the civil and the political leadership of the country. I think this would be helpful. I think putting and selling Pakistan besides carrying a begging bowl is the right thing to do. Not only investment in agriculture, not only investment in minerals, not only investment in other areas, but what's really important is a privatization program of Pakistan, which is actually your biggest spinner when it comes to getting investment in the country. Because these are brownfield projects, they are already set up. Some of the very easy ones are to go do the LNG power plants, the easiest to kick off this process. Then you also remember, because I was on the table at that time, His Royal Highness came to Pakistan and he said he wanted to set up a refinery. This was 2019. I'm talking to you in July 2023, and I'm still saying that that's a project. And I think the government, when it talks about this $24 billion of monies to be flowing in from the Middle Eastern countries, refineries, one of the key projects that's still there. So, all in all, I think that is something you can start looking at by changing the lens of debt-creating instruments and moving into non-debt-creating instruments. So FDI is a key non-debt-creating instrument besides others. But to get FDI into the country, you also have to do one thing, which I think is slightly missing here, to get the local domestic investor, local entrepreneur, the local guy also interested in doing all this. Because eventually the local guy has to go in and find a global value chain. I was reading this, policy that has just been approved by the cabinet. I was happy to hear that they've started talking about global value chain integration of Pakistan. So, I mean, that's the right direction. Then you again have to really upgrade the board of investment. And, whenever you've spoken to me, I've always said this, that Pakistan's HR is the key to doing any of the things that we are talking about today.
Let me go to Dr. Qais. I'll come back to you. Dr. Qais, do you agree with primarily what Ali Salman Sahab and Dr. Khaqan Najeeb are saying? They're saying that these measures perhaps are as not as revolutionary, but perhaps consistency needs to be there in achieving the kind of goals that we need, which has been missing in the past.
I think yes. What they're saying is very important, that we have decided to go into a direction. But there are 2 or 3 things that need to be remembered. Number one, we did most of this as far as CPEC is also concerned. And the pace of CPEC is not up to the level that we thought that it will change the things that happen. So our expectations from, again, this board might be a little more than the reality that thing is. 2 things I have noticed in today's declaration. Number one, in the initial, and Dr. Abbasi also mentioned, was mining. But in today's declaration, that has been excluded from foreign direct investment. The other thing that I did not see here was tourism. These are 2 important parts of this country which can bring
Right, Dr. Qais, let me come back to you. Ali Salman Sahab, do you agree with Dr. Qais? I mean, of course, tourism is a huge part, or should be a huge part of any economy. In the past, we saw some inroads being made, but they never really materialized. Is that, why have we consistently failed in that direction? Do you think it has to do with stability also, our security situation, a multitude of factors?
I mean, tourism is definitely one of the important potential areas. And before we go into the sectors, I'll like to take a step back and like to add something which Dr. Khaqan was saying. and is an important point, that whether we are able to move from a debt creating instrument to non-debt creating instrument, and hoping that FDI that we will attract now under this policy would be actually non-debt creating.
Okay.
Now, this is what we actually assumed earlier when we were bringing Chinese investment in the power sectors, right? So on the paper, this is not a loan. This is an investment in the IPP mode. But the terms and conditions are such that the sovereign guarantees were secured, and because of those sovereign guarantees, the liabilities have been built into our system. Whether we are able to use the electricity produced by Chinese IPPs or not, we have to pay the bills. And so, those details are yet to be announced. Therefore, I really hope that when we are talking, for instance, one of the announcement which was made recently was by Abu Dhabi Port, that they have, they have shown a commitment to invest $1.8 billion in managing the Karachi Port Trust when the current the arrangement expire. Now, what will be the terms and conditions of this arrangement? Whether we'll be bringing any kind of sovereign guarantee or not, or whether it will be a private sector participation will be there or not. And on that note, if you look at the formation of the SIFC and the subcommittees, one thing which you will notice is that, yes, there is a lot of coordination between the government across the ministries, across the civil and military side of the government. Although technically military has no direct role in the economic governance, but we are seeing, the private sector is largely missing from the composition. And I think one of the important stakeholders should have been the association sector, like overseas chambers and other associations, which are really bringing or have brought significant amount of private sector investment. And one can argue whether this private sector investment has increased efficiency in government or in Pakistan economy or not, or whether this is, as we call, as market seeking investment. So those discussions have to be framed, but hopefully when we get more details about these contracts, we'll be able to comment more on that later.
But is it true that there's a criticism as far as the private sector is concerned that they're largely rent seekers? Well,
again, if you let's say if you prioritize one sector to another sector, for instance, in the past, auto sectors and auto sector and textile sector, and also in the recent years, real estate sector were our favorite.
Okay.
When you do this pick and choose of winners and losers within the private sector, then what happens? Then government announces special privileges, special incentives, tax holidays, which then create protection, which will lead to rent seeking. So this should not be the case.
But what
this
about,
should be an level
if you remember, there was
there
was a controversy during the last government where 3 million loans through $3 million loans to
$3 billion, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Were given without any interest.
Under the yeah.
So there are a lot of there are issues here that unfortunately we haven't really resolved till now.
Yeah. So I mean, again, I think the National Assembly Standing Committee on Public Accounts Committee has taken this initiative and like to hear more details of how those funds were actually utilized. There is a counter argument that during the time of COVID, when the demand was compressed, those funds were utilized to keep the industry going, to keep the employment in a stable position. So that helped, but that's one argument. So we'd like to again know the details of how this was invested. For instance, was it invested in plant and machinery, or was it invested, or was it divested to other sectors of the economy? So this is still an open question. A lot of speculation is there. Okay, but the important thing is, level playing field, I think, is the most important thing in any of these investment regimes. That has to be ensured by the government.
Dr. Khaqan, level playing field, which is what Ali Salman Sahab is saying. Do you think that these measures that are being taken, are we moving towards ensuring that level playing field is being provided or will be provided across the board?
So Mahrukh, before I comment on that, can I just answer your question on this turf loan? And there is a big debate that has ensued in the public arena, that whether it was good to give those loans, not good, or whatever. So today I was actually reminded, someone, I had tweeted this few months back or something, and I had said that the State Bank of Pakistan or anyone else within the government must do an introspection and see what have been the benefits of giving turf at 1% for 10 years. See, has it helped the exports? What is the kind of machinery that has come in? And learn from our mistakes, even if there were. Um, uh, I'm not one to call everything, on the corruption or favoritism. But if we get this kind of study, then we may be able to tell better, not only to point to anyone, but to actually learn to do it better. That maybe SMEs should have been the ones that we should have gone to. So that's my very clear view, that a study from the State Bank should come through where it tells people that these, without naming, that these went to this kind of industry, this kind of industry, this is the export potential created, these are the new jobs created for our learning. I think that is the way countries progress. That is the way research progresses. So that's my point of view. On the level playing field, so, again, we have to now start thinking that a couple of important things here, that, investing into non-tradable sectors like the real estate, non-productive sectors like the real estate have been our forte. We also have wanted to sell real estate to the world. I mean, you have to really think this is probably not the way. We want to have investment, but into areas now very specifically to pay back the loans, as Ali was trying to point to. We have to improve our productivity, we have to improve our efficiency, and we have to improve our export bias. We have to, move into these areas. So where CPEC 1 was maybe infrastructure, CPEC 2 has to be about those industries
but
that can then sell to
Dr.
the
Khaqan, there is, for productivity, of course, we are seeing this government, really delve into the human capital and try to really get that, to harness that and to bring that into the fore. Do you think that that is one of the ways in which we can actually benefit?
Of course, I mean, productivity is, is a very simple concept. I mean, all of us have to be better at productivity, and that is how productivity is improved. At the firm level, productivities have to improve. At the agriculture productivity level, the other day there was an initiative of limbs that you might have heard, where they want to reach people, and a database has been set up. So the weather conditions, soil conditions, all those issues will come in. So, of course, if we start lifting the productivity at every level, and maybe more money has to flow into the SMEs for them to be able to do this. Firms become more productive, they become more outward looking, and that is the next 5 to 10 years of Pakistan. If you do all these things,
do you expect it to be successful? Do you expect us to be, Dr. Qais, do you expect us to be able to harness that potential which the government really wants to tap into?
The problem is that there is a very important divorce between how we want our country and its economics and its productivity to increase over time. But at the same time, the measures taken, whether they are in the land productivity or whether they are in the human resource productivity, especially our children, our school system, our syllabi, as well as our SMEs and our machines. Most of our electricity is being produced by second-hand machines. So there are two directions here. On one side, our wish to become a very productive and how will I say, a profit-making country. But on the other hand, we have not done any government in that context. I don't know whether the private sector has the problem or the bureaucracy has the problem or the infrastructure has the problem. But the synergy, I do not see that synergy. So somehow a certain section of this country will flourish with all this. But most of the country that I see with which is divorced from the world views and world technology and the way world productivity works, I think there some I don't know whether we want this productivity to increase through the government sector education, or whether we want this productivity to increase by our private sector making the initiative, or the foreign investment coming in with technology and skills and management skills. Somewhere I have not seen that synergy of all this. So I think that we are wanting too much from a country where a large amount of people are
Let me go to Ali Salman
part
Sahib.
of.
Ali Salman Sahib, do you agree? You think that we don't have that kind of cohesion, synergy, what Dr. Qais is talking about, or do we want too much too soon?
Well, I think that's the whole idea behind this SIFC, that the government and the leadership in different institutions have realized that there is a lack of cohesion. There are already institutions which were supposedly, made
like
to
one window operation, which never, things which never really took off. I mean, it's been done in the past.
Council of Common Interest.
Yes.
There are many institutions which have not worked in the past.
Yes.
So it's not the issue of perhaps the the formation of these bodies. But I think we need to see how they function, and how they, what kind of results they bring. So for instance, one very important area of collaboration which can happen because of this civil-military cooperation in the economic area is the defense R&D.
Okay.
Now, over last few decades, we have invested, the state has invested billions of dollars in the defense capacity, right? And that has also improved the quality of products, let's say in the aerospace sector. But those capabilities have not come out for commercial usage. Right? So while we talk about defense production is one of the 4 or 5 priority areas. We are not talking, and I would like to suggest that defense R&D should be picked up as one of the themes under SIFC, where the technology spillover, should be allowed to be benefited by the private sector. So this is exactly what happened after Second World War in US case, where US government ensured that the private sector research they become the customer of the research, and they were also supporting funds like DARPA funds. So I think this is an example where we can pick, and I hope that the civil and the commercial application of this research needs to be fully exploited if we want real collaboration between civil and the military side in terms of economic governance.
Let me go to Dr. Khaqan. Dr. Khaqan, what about, of course we have seen these new authorities, but isn't that true that there's consistently other authorities? There is, agricultural officers, there is, other, as far as we, of course, LIMS at this time, everyone is saying is going to be, has huge potential. But overall, we do make new organizations, we do tend to make new bodies when there are plenty already existing. Isn't that true?
So correct. There is Pakistan Agriculture Research Council. There is these NARCs. Then the agri universities. But I mean, as they say, I mean, we have to see the end result, right? I mean, where do we actually stand in terms of agriculture productivity? And agriculture productivity is probably the easiest to judge. So let me put a figure to you. So Pakistan produces about 3 tons per hectare of wheat. Ireland, which is one of the world's best producers, produces 10 tons per hectare. Pakistan produces 566 kgs per hectare of cotton. China, our best friend, produces 2,000 kilograms per hectare. So now if you see the productivity gap, despite having all these organizations, one, we can go and, instill R&D in these organizations. We can go and improve all these organizations, which we should do, we must do, and we must make that effort to improve upon them. But the point being that if that coordination is the key thing, and FATF, CPEC, plus the COVID instance has taught us that the military establishment can do good on that. And in terms of LIMS, actually, there is a little more to it. And the more part is that here you have to use a lot of drone technology, for example. I'm just giving you one example that I'm aware of. Now, that technology is more so with the military establishment, and maybe they can play a better role in that. So I'm just trying to see where we can use them, where they can help support these kinds of setups. And agri productivity improvement, and of course there are other things that the organizations that are there have to do. Again, if I remember the R&D figure, it's also partly our fault that we haven't put in the kind of money into these organizations. I think our R&D is extremely low, and if I remember the figure, it's 0.18% of GDP or
Every
something.
government, Dr. Khaqan, every government does bring about a package of some 100 million, or as far as agriculture particularly is concerned. But where does that money go now? I mean, I know this might be a very I don't think it's a very basic question, but I'm sure that people want to know where does that amount go if it doesn't contribute to what we want as far as reform is concerned, if it doesn't contribute to increasing yields, technologies, where does it go?
Mahrukh, I mean, a lot of that money does go to just, running these big organizations with the kind of human resource that probably cannot deliver. I mean, that is the honest opinion one can give about them. And then we can't hire the kind of people we want to hire.
What about fertilizing subsidizing the fertilizing sector? Sorry.
Fertilizer sector. That is true also. We do, and the kind of gas we give them. So now what do you really need there? And I keep saying this, that's the kind of research you need where you prove that the economic value of giving gas to fertilizer is not as good, or giving gas subsidy and selling it to domestic is not a good idea. Rather than the gas should be producing power which should be going into every household, and they should be heating and cooking with that. These are the changes that, when we say we need to make a structural change, these are the kinds of thought processes, but they can only be delivered if we can really do this level of research within the government, or by the universities that the government has.
We are investing. I'm going to Dr. Qais with this. Dr. Qais, do you think that we are investing enough in research, for example, in the research sector?
Absolutely not. We need, look, it's not only, we have two problems. And number one is that the money is not enough. But I have found out that even if you inject more money, that does not mean that you are getting the research, because the capability and capacity to do that research, we somehow these universities and the private sector and the government itself, the three parts which do have to deliver in research, are trying to plagiarize and trying to do the easy way out. We need to come up with robust ways of and actually taking on board researchers who like to do research because they love research. And then we need to reward them with some monetary or other, their name and such for the research that they do. And that is because these things are missing. I mean, for example, we in the university levels, we can have a competition of, let's say, 500,000 rupees as a reward, and you will see the results will become better than what they are now. So not only that we need more investments in research, we also need better structures to use that research where it is needed. So we might be writing theses and we might be doing, but especially the Agricultural Research Council now is not doing the type of research that agriculture needs in this country. So, but then there is another way out, and that is buying research from the world, rather than how the phrase goes, inventing the wheel again. But at the same time, yes, I agree with Dr. Khaqan Abbasi that we need to have a cost-benefit analysis of every rupee that we invest, whether in research or whether in productivity or whether in some form of structural reforms. We need to find out what are the results that
Ali Salman Sahab, as far as this is, this investment in human capital is concerned, there are, it's again a whirlpool. If we look at any one measure that's being taken, it seems like it's been done before, but it has to be redone differently. Is that, would you agree with that? I mean, we're doing the same things, but there are certain things that have to be done differently, because nothing seems to be very, very, innovative in the sense that the measures that have to be taken.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you that a lot of these ideas, for instance, the mapping of land for better use of, better use of cropping has been there for ages, right? So this is not that we are coming up with a new idea altogether. We are maybe trying to propose a new mechanism, and I think that it's very important to present that we are not short of resources. The question is how we are allocating those resources, right? So, for instance, it was pointed out correctly that significant part of the R&D goes into salaries. 90 to 95% of the institutions which are responsible for the research, 90 to 95% of their budget goes into salaries and not to the actual research. So if you're not doing actual research, then obviously you will not find the productivity improvement which we should expect. So these are the ground realities. Now, to which extent these ground realities can be changed by these mega structures that we are seeing now, like Apex Committees, Implementation Committee, this is a big question mark. And therefore
we are often compared to Bangladesh, for example, and their growth.
So one of the things which we actually, when we talk about research, is that I think we should be spending less money in universities and more money in the industry side of research. Right? Every industry has problems. Like take agriculture, take light engineering, take electronics. Every industry you will find problems of efficiency, problem of, let's say, branding, and they need research. But if you give more money to universities, I'm afraid that a lot of that money is being wasted in just production of papers and not actually problem solving. Now, one more thing I'd like to add, because we are talking about here, today, collaboration between the civil side and the defense side. One thing which I note with concern is this increasing securitization of our economic policy. Now, it was mentioned, for instance, drones are under the control of military establishment. We know in the past we have heard this similar case can be made about the 3D printer, which all over the world is used openly by universities, by industrialists, by young entrepreneurs to experiment. Now, we can't import 3D printer because people in the security establishment think this is a security threat. We can't import a drone because it will become a security threat. Now, these technologies have to be democratized. If we want the fruit of this investment to be used by entrepreneurs, by innovators, not just in the government, but outside the government, only then I think we can see the real prosperity. Otherwise, I'm afraid that this top-down approach, which SIFC seems to suggest, is not going to bring the desirable results in the long run.
Right. Dr. Khaqan, we talk about the role of government. We also talk about the fact that the government, and invariably then it comes down to the fact that we should reduce government spending. Isn't all over the world we see governments perhaps facilitating businesses, perhaps making, having policies which are going to help businesses, but there has to be a significant part, a significant role that we want the private sector to play, that they have to man up, they have to take ownership of the country in the sense that, there has to be initiatives that have to come from them. Are we lacking them?
So where do we stand in this thought process of what the government should be doing and what the private sector should be doing? So let's think this through, Mahrukh. So, operations should be handled by the private sector. That's largely creates efficiency. If you compare our telecom sector with our energy sector, I think it becomes very obvious. Now, policy has to be done by the government, and in the developing world, what I tend to see is that policies thinking is not up to the mark, and then they tend to outsource that policy to the institutions which are the multilaterals. Pakistan, I think, tends to be in that case. And then there is the third pillar also, which I think are the regulators which in our country are nascent. This is very, very important. I mean, and actually, I'm even going to go to the extent and say the regulatory HR in the country is extremely weak. I think we need people to either get trained, or we need to, in this case, at least have people who have, an understanding. But if policy has to be done by the government, so I'll give you an example because I'm an Australian trained economist. So one of the
Yes.
very what you say good organizations that I have had a chance to work slightly with was the Australian Productivity Commission. I mean,
Okay.
one of the really, really strong institution. When I compare that to our NPO, which we also have, which is our productivity organizations, I think the multilaterals kind of forgot to really upgrade that, but created all the other regulators. So so here's our own thinking, our own policy. As I say, it's time also to employ within the government setups to do good operational research. When I used to be in government and people, so we wrote a couple of books on the SOEs, for example, in Pakistan. The way we were able to do that is that, we tried to do more operational research, bring out the kind of things that were going on there, do a bit of ratio analysis, maybe not a lot of in-depth work, but some work. So the governments and all our divisions and ministries have to start thinking like that. And then, of course, I must mention the role of the Planning Commission. I mean, this all should have been or should be a function of
Dr.
Planning
Khaqan,
Commission
when we,
department.
in the last government, before I go to Dr. Qais, but there is in the last government of the PMLN, we saw the BOI, we also saw, there was Punjab Board of Investment and Trade. I'm saying that, there were provincial bodies also in addition to the Board of Investment, which exists at this time also. There was, categorical, they were given a target that they had to achieve. Do you believe that they were successful at that time? And perhaps that model has not been followed subsequently?
So, Mahrukh, I think we give them these targets, but when I give my son something to do, I must also understand his capability or upgrade his capability to be able to do that. I must give him the leverage if he's to get that responsibility, the ring fencing to be able to work there. BOI, Privatization Commission, PBIT in Punjab, these are organizations we've tried to create as corporate bodies, but unfortunately, I think the HR capability there has remained weak, and therefore ease of doing business or regulatory guillotine, we've not been able to do. Where do we again keep going? We again keep going to the multilaterals and asking them to tell us how to move forward. I think that thinking now has to change. We need to believe to pay people well. We need to believe to give them targets and ring fence those kind of researchers and let them work. Collaboration with the universities will come, but I think that's again a process that we start within the ministries, Planning Commission, NPO. We have to build the kind of capability to do this research rather than just relying on everything coming outsourced to the multilaterals. I think that's something one has to start thinking about.
Dr. Qais, do you agree with what Dr. Khaqan is saying as far as these measures are concerned? They were earlier taken without perhaps giving the kind of authority that is needed, the kind of leeway that is needed for them to function and perhaps yield the kind of results that we want?
Yes, I absolutely agree. But the sentence that was taken about the human resources weakness is the key point. Till such time that we revamp our, although it has become a provincial subject, but we have to revamp our education system in a way that this younger generation has to have some form of skills and productivity to the level of economic activity that we need in this country. There has to be a link in what we are teaching them to the policy that where we want our exportables to be, whether they are from the agriculture or whether they are from small machine building or whether they are from chemical industry or any other industry. That link is missing. I mean, just this old metric system and cramming, and that also affects the university research. So I believe that not only institutional structural reforms are needed, which Dr. Abbasi is talking about, we also need the human resource rebuilding, although that will take about 10 to 20 years. But I think now skill enhancement can have about in 6 months or a year if we have specific such whether in the private sector or in the government sector.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being with us. Ali Salman Saab, thank you for joining us. Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, thank you for being with us. Dr. Qais Aslam, thank you for your very valuable time. Of course, you know, other than institutional structural reforms, we talked about, you know, as far as HR rebuilding measures are concerned, skills enhancement, overall, perhaps delving into research, R&D sector. All of these measures are important. All of these need to be taken out of box thinking also. Ali Salman Saab, before I close.
Sorry for this interruption. Just last minute. I think one of the important takeaway message, especially in the context of SIFC, would be ensuring of transparency and credibility.
Okay.
Now, when the government says that we will ensure the repatriation of capital which the investors will bring. Now, obviously, in last 1 year, we have seen that given the macroeconomic situation, that was stopped. So that kind of put a big challenge on the government shoulders, how to bring that kind of transparency. And secondly, when we talk about business regulations and facilitations, let's use the existing research which has been done. And I like to especially mention the research done by PIDE on its flood series, that use that research to improve the regulatory environment. And then implement those changes.
On that note, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today. We also want to take a moment to talk about Mohtarma Fatma Ali Jinnah. It's her 56th death anniversary today. And of course, her leadership, her role as far as in the making of Pakistan, her role in proving herself to be a role model as far as a woman is concerned, as far as a leader is concerned, as far as a support system to Muhammad Ali Jinnah is concerned. In all respects, I think we must remember her. We must take a moment to think about all that she did for this country, Madre Millat of Pakistan. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.